So it's now been 19 years since the United States of America and Britain, along with their allies, invaded Iraq.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war.
Without UN Security Council approval in what was an illegal war of regime change in the country, resulting in 1 million lives being lost and many other millions having to flee their country, and has led to an Iraq today plagued with extremism, sectarianism, and corruption. Not only that, US forces are still there on the ground in Iraq in their thousands. And on top of that, last year, NATO announced that it was expanding its own mission to 4,000 personnel in the country.
Today, we decided to expand NATO's training mission in Iraq. The size of our mission will increase from 500 personnel to around 4,000.
Today, Iraq is still in a constant state of fear and instability, all because the United States, Britain, and its allies invaded based upon a pack of lies that WMD existed in Iraq, which it didn't.
We know that Saddam Hussein is determined to keep his weapons of mass destruction. Determined to make more.
Now today it's well known that the war in Iraq was a bad idea at the very least and would be condemned by most people in the West, but that wasn't the case when it occurred. In fact, on the day that the invasion was launched, US public support was polled to be higher than 70% in favor of the war. Not only this, but Western media were complicit in portraying the invasion of Iraq as a liberation of the Iraqi people.
And what they needed to see was American boys and girls going house to house from Basra to Baghdad and basically saying, well, suck on this.
Even after weeks of reports coming out of Iraq that thousands of Iraqi civilians had been killed by American and British and other invading forces, including in situations where the United States was actively accused of striking a maternity hospital ran by the Red Crescent, causing a massacre in Baghdad, the Western media continued its nationalistic drive of complicity in the war, promoting it as a good thing and a good deed done by its government. Just take a look at this clip, which was broadcasted by the BBC with a straight face.
He said that they would be able to take Baghdad without a bloodbath, and that in the end the Iraqis would be celebrating. And on both of those points he has been proved conclusively right, and it would be entirely ungracious, even for his critics, not to acknowledge that tonight he stands as a larger man.
Now that clip did not age well, and it's one of many examples of the very same thing being said around that time. And sure, afterwards many of these news outlets offered light apologies and sometimes formal apologies for their coverage of the Iraq war after there were no weapons of mass destruction found, no links with Al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein made, and it turned out that the entire country was ruined on a pack of lies.
Should we take the risk that he will not someday use these weapons?
But beyond mainly soft apologies, which were really not apologies at all, we didn't get any accountability in the West when it came to the leadership which committed these war crimes. For instance, Tony Blair is a multi-millionaire, has constant security, and is still accepted as a public figure who can give speeches for a large amount of money in many cases, and also is brought on Western television, including the BBC, on a regular basis to talk on a range of topics.
If you had known that that was the scale of bloodshed, would you have still gone to war?
Well, the alternative was leaving Saddam in charge of Iraq.
Then we have the example of former US President George W. Bush Jr., who, by the way, got elected after waging the Iraq War, and now his image is really being revived, and last year was able to go on a tour around America talking to audiences about his own leadership.
When Mr. Bush and Mrs. Obama held hands and swayed to the music.
This is far from any accountability for clear violations of international law, and now more than ever, these figures are actually being celebrated and still listened to despite the war crimes which they are accused of committing. Just take the example of Condoleezza Rice, who was brought onto Fox News to talk about how invading another sovereign country is a war crime. All of this is to say the propaganda machine, which is manufacturing consent for war and advocacy for one side or another, is very much still at play. And it is the same media now which celebrates the likes of launching missiles into Syria a few years ago.
I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons, and they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield,
which is supposed to be educating Western audiences as to how they should perceive world events and geopolitics, and presents clear double standards when it is reporting on the wars waged by the enemies of the West and wars waged by the West itself.